Hello, my name is Wayne Letizia, and I'm a resident at Westminster Woods on Julington Creek. My wife and I have been here for 5.5 years, and we really like it here. It's a nice place to live. But you can't live here yet. You can't live here until you're in your 60s. So we like to have children around us, but none of them live here. So we are reading stories to children, and we enjoy being with you even through the video. I'm going to read you a story today called Jamie O'Rourke and the Big Potato. Jamie O'Rourke and the Big Potato. Now, this is a long story, so you're going to have to pay attention to it. Jamie O'Rourke was the laziest man in all of Ireland. He would do anything to avoid working, especially if it had to do with growing potatoes. And there he is, just lazing at the side of his cabin, his cottage, and not working in the potato field. Jamie O'Rourke, his wife Eileen would say, "we'll have nothing to eat this winter if you don't go out and dig up the praties." I guess that's a word they use for potatoes. "Oh, the saints preserve us," Jamie would whine. "Me back's as sore as can be. Sure, I'm telling you, wife, you'll have to dig them up yourself. I'll break in two if as much as get out of this bed." So Eileen, who had done all the planting and watering and weeding anyhow, would go out to the tiny garden and dig up the smallest potatoes in Ireland, because Jamie was too lazy to dig a larger garden, and he had no money to buy good potato seed. So there's Eileen going out to the garden to dig up the potatoes. She has one little tiny potato in her hand. Can you see that? Then poor Eileen wrenched her back and was laid up in bed. St. Bridget and the Virgin Mary herself must have smiled on Eileen O'Rourke, the village woman said. Why, it's the first rest that she has had since she married Jamie O'Rourke. There she is in bed, and all the women are gossiping about her. With Eileen in bed, Jamie began to worry. No Eileen to dig meant no praties all winter, and no praties meant no food. "Oh, poor me," wailed Jamie. "I'll starve to death. I'd best go to church and confess to Father O'Malley. There's no telling how soon old death will be knocking on me door." So even though it was midnight, Jamie set out for the church. He was about halfway down the hill when he heard singing and a tapping sound. I wonder what the singing and tapping was. We'll find out when I turn the page. "Sure, and I wouldn't be knowing," Jamie whispered, "but I swear it's a leprechaun." And sure enough, sitting in a circle of ferns in the moonlight was a leprechaun, singing and hammering tiny nails into the heels of the fairy boots he was making. Jamie knew just what to do. He crept up and grabbed the little man by his coattails and held him firm. Let me go, the leprechaun shouted. "Not on your life," Jamie said. "Not until you show me where you keep your pot of gold." So there's Jamie finding the leprechaun and holding on to his coattails. How is the leprechaun going to get out of this? Now, everyone in Ireland knows that leprechauns make boots and dancing shoes for the fairies. who pay for them with gold. And everyone knows that if you catch a leprechaun, he'll pay for his freedom with his pot of gold. But this leprechaun was cleverer than most. "Oh, please, Mr. Mortal Man," he pleaded. "I'm just starting out making fairy shoes, and I only have 1 or 2 pieces of gold in my pot. Won't you make a wish instead?" "Why, what would I wish for?" Jamie asked. "Me, who is about to die of starvation because my wife is sick in bed, and I can't dig the praties for the winter. And there's such puny praties anyhow." "Well," said the leprechaun, reaching into his pocket, "you could wish for the biggest pratie in the world. It would last all winter, and you wouldn't have to do anything more than plant the seed, water it, and wait. So what would you do? Would you trade a pot of gold for a seed of potato? Let's see what Jamie O'Rourke did." That sounded wonderful to Jamie. "Done," he shouted. And as the leprechaun dropped the seed in Jamie's hand, Jamie let go of his coattails, and off the leprechaun scampered. When Eileen heard what he had done, she was furious. "Jamie O'Rourke, you're not only the laziest man in Ireland, but a fool as well. Given up a pot of gold for a pratie seed." "Well, I'm going to plant the seed and water it, and we'll see," Jamie said. And out he went. And faith, Eileen did see. In no time at all, the biggest, finest potato plant had sprouted out of the ground, followed by the potato itself. It was so big it pushed up not only all the dirt in the garden, but the garden shed in the corner of the cottage as well. "Well, surely now it's ready to dig," Jamie said proudly. "And look at that big potato. And here's the cottage, and the corner of the cottage is pushed up, and the shed over here. That potato is so big it upset everything." He hoed all around it, but he couldn't dig that pratie out of the ground. He got a beam and a big rock and tried to pry it out. He pushed and pushed, but it wouldn't budge. As he was pondering what to do, his neighbor passed by on his way to the village. He couldn't believe his eyes. He couldn't wait to tell everyone in the village what he had seen. And before you knew it, the hill up to Jamie's house was filled with villagers coming to see the big potato. "Where did it come from?" they asked. Jamie told them about the lucky night he had caught the leprechaun and how smart he had been. "Why, anyone could have gotten a pot of gold," he bragged. "But the biggest pratie in the world? Well, that took some doing." "However did you outsmart a leprechaun?" they all asked at once. Jamie hesitated and scratched his head. "We'll help you dig up your pratie, Jamie, if you tell us how you did it." And they grabbed their shovels and hoes and started to dig. They dug and they dug and they pushed and they shoved until the potato flew up out of the hole. It rolled down the hill, faster and faster, until it reached the bottom, where it bounced up high and came to a stop, wedged between the stone walls on either side of the road. What to do now? Can you see the potato rolling down the hill and the potato wedged on the road? What are they going to do? The pratie is so big that no one, no cart, nothing can get by it, the constable complained to Father O'Malley. How's a body to get in or out of the village? What shall we do? The villagers wailed. Then they all looked at Jamie and said, "It's your pratie. You'll have to move it out of the way." Well, Eileen spoke up, there's more than enough Prady for everyone. Why don't you all take some? And there's Elaine she's telling the villagers that they can have some potato, or Prady as they call it. So the villagers sawed and chopped and carted off huge pieces of potato, while Jamie sat on the stone wall and watched. There they are, carving up the potato. All winter, everyone had potato to eat, and eat, and eat, until no one wanted to see or hear of a potato again. See, they're very happy at the beginning, but then their faces show they're not very happy about all the potato and nothing but potato to eat. Even Father O'Malley over here. In the spring, Jamie said, I saved a potato eye for a seed, and it's just about time to plant it. Oh no, all the villagers cried. If you promise not to plant it, Jamie, we'll promise before St. Patrick and all the saints to see that you and Eileen always have plenty to cook and eat. We don't want another giant Prady round here. Jamie smiled and agreed. What a perfect life for a lazy man. And so you see, darling Eileen, Jamie told her, I wasn't such a fool with that leprechaun after all. And Eileen had to admit that Jamie O'Rourke was right. And there's the leprechaun. And that's the end of our story. I hope that you enjoyed it.